The Long Haul Podcast, America's Irish Voice. Interviews with inspiring immigrants, renowned Irish personalities, and discussions on all things Irish America. Presented by Michael Dorgan. On this week's podcast, Réamonn Byrne from the Hardway Home team is back to reflect on his team's attempt to row a 25-foot boat from New York to Ireland over the summer. Réamonn, who is from Waterford, along with Americans Chris McCaffrey and Ryen Cosgro, were embarking on a 3,000-mile voyage to raise funds for the Kevin Bell Repatriation Trust. As listeners know, the journey was plagued by setbacks and the lads had to be pulled ashore to Cape Cod just 1 week into their initial voyage. They set sail again in July and appeared to be going well while overcoming more problems, including the boat's rudder getting seriously damaged. Eventually though, they had to raise the white flag because of a technical failure. Ray says that they were about 2/3 of the way home to Ireland before eventually having to be picked up by a massive oil tanker. An inspirational and courageous journey which, while coming up short, can be better measured in bravery, ingenuity, determination and perseverance. The main thing is that all three men returned home safe. Ray gives me a recap on the trials and tribulations of the trip, the problems they faced, and if they will attempt the feat again. Ray is now back working at his Chelsea restaurant in Manhattan called Worthwild, so we also delve into the current state of the New York City hospitality scene and how inflation is just the latest blow to the industry. If you'd like to donate to the Kevin Bell Repatriation Trust, you can do so on their website, or if you'd like to find out more about the organisation, check out our previous podcast with Colin Bell. That podcast and all of our previous podcasts are up on the longhaulpodcast.com, where we also have post-match interviews and reports on all of this year's New York GA finals. We also have plenty of boxing news ahead of Jason Quigley's world title fight next week, and of course a great story on the near 150 Irish runners who completed the New York City Marathon last Sunday. You can also read about other Irish American sports stories and other news items on the site. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at The Long Haul Podcast. Ray, thanks very much for coming back on The Long Haul Podcast. It's good to see that you're healthy. Healthy, yeah. You're our most popular guest.
Yeah.
And you're a bit cleanly shaven. Tell me, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I've been back a few weeks now from the summer's adventures. Fine. Yeah.
Tell me, just to recap, Ray, you set off back over the summer. The aim was to row from New York to Waterford. You got stuck after the first week. Just give us a quick recap.
The brief recap: we left June 15th, aimed to row a boat from New York home to Ireland. After about 7 or 8 days, we had kind of power issues with the solar, and I talked about that before. So we got towed back into Cape Cod, where we kind of fixed that up. We thought, and then we left from Cape Cod. We were stuck in Cape Cod again then for like nearly 2 weeks. And then we left from there after, I forget which, there was some hurricane. We dealt with a lot of hurricanes and tropical storms over the course of the summer. So we left there again on July 10th. So that's pretty late, very late in the season to be attempting to do this. You want to kind of be out of the water before September, which will kind of come into play later in the story. So we left on July 10th. And we headed back out to sea then.
Tell me, so, and how many weeks were you at sea? Because we were following you anxiously here. They went a bit quiet on the social media, and I was like, these guys are going to make it. They're going to make it. Everything seems to be going okay.
I know. We were there all together for like nearly 60 days, including the first week. Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, our boat, Barney, was kind of, the boat herself was great, right? But everything on the boat broke on a daily basis. So we were running like a full-time shop on the boat to keep this boat. Bits of the boat would just be taken apart to put other bits of the boat back together. Just like day after week, like the water maker broke, the power broke again. The aftermath of Hurricane Henry ripped the whole rudder off the back of the boat in the middle of a storm, which was kind of a very sketchy evening out at sea. But we fixed it all, and then we got kind of done in the end by a computer chip in the new power system that got wet and essentially kind of doomed the trip.
Yeah, I saw a picture of the rudder. It was just destroyed.
Yeah, the rudder, that day was that wasn't shortly before we kind of had to abandon ship. And we sometimes you get the swell height out at sea, but sometimes after like the hurricanes and that, where they're just coming with so much more force and water in them, the waves. And we were probably out there, and it was probably going 8 foot, 10 foot waves, which when they're whipping in they're big waves when you're looking at them. And then the sea was still building. So we had like a storm drogue out the back of the boat, which kind of functions like a brake almost. So it catches the water as you go over the waves in the next one. So you don't like go flying down the face of the waves for the bigger waves. And then I suppose you got to think as well, if it says it's like 10 foot swell, every like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, there's a way bigger set. So there's probably like 15 foot waves in the 10 foot swell. So you'll feel them every night, like it's just massive waves come. So the back of the boat was getting kind of a little bit rocked sometimes by the bigger swell. But we had done it before on the drogue, and it worked well. Like essentially, you're not even rowing; you're just trying to keep the back of the boat straight so you don't go topple down the waves. And then we were sitting there, and something started to feel like you could just feel the back start to tip out on the boat, the stern. And I said to Ryan, I was like, I must have been in the front or out on the deck doing something. I was like, Ryan, check what happened out the back. And he put his head out the back hatch window, the hatch door, and he's like, oh, and we're like, what? He goes, it's gone. And I literally thought he was talking about like a pin or some little part of it. No, the whole thing was ripped off by a wave. So that was not great. And then because the seas were getting bigger and bigger, we couldn't do anything about that in the moment. So we switched to like the para anchor, which is the sea anchor. So now the boat is kind of going every way because the drogue, we have to pull the drogue in to put out the other one. And now we're in big waves that are getting like kind of topply, and you're out on deck, and you don't want one of them like crashing down and just like sweeping you. I mean, we're tethered in, but you're going over if one of them hits you. So got out there, put out the para anchor, which held us into like the predominant swell. So like if you think the wind is kind of blowing the bigger waves, so they're following, that's where it's coming from. But there's also other swells coming in different directions. So the para anchor is going to hold you into whatever the most force is. So wherever the wind is blowing, it will blow you back that way. And then the line catches the parachute, which holds you in place and brings you up and down the big waves. But the issue was, if you don't have a rudder in the water, those smaller swells are just pushing you beam into these big waves. So even though we have a line here, we're now getting pushed by these other waves into the big waves. And there's nothing we could do about that. So like essentially during the daytime, you're just looking, one guy's looking out the window, and you have to lock everything down because it's more than likely you're going to go over at some point, right? So we're sitting there. We nearly capsized once, where literally it's like the whole boat just goes the whole way up, and Chris, who's not a small boy, just fell out of the sky on top of like me and Ryan. And so that was kind of, and even during the daytime, because you can see you can see miles away pretty much, right? It was still a kind of a clearish day. and you can see those massive big waves coming in and kind of brace for them. So we're going to be like, oh, set coming, and then we would all like hold the side of the boat, and you try and brace yourself in case we like spun over. But then the nighttime comes, and because in the cabin everything is totally shut, it has to be airtight for the roll. It gets really clammy. Like the sweat is just coming down your face. The walls are literally wet to touch with the condensation. And then the power is all kind of down. So there's just like a red light. So the three of us are just in this small little capsule with a red light on. And now you can't see the big waves. So all you can do is hear them. And you can just hear the as it gets closer, and they just bang the boat, bang, bang, bang. And then the boat gets lifted up. So it was an interesting night. I mean, it was pretty, no one spoke. Like it was just, you would hear the white water, like kind of like that low growl, just get closer and closer. And sometimes it would like crack the boat, send the boat up. And then other times it would kind of just miss you, kind of kick the back. So that was there wasn't much sleep had that evening.
I could imagine.
Yeah, but we got up like the next morning when it got bright and the seas kind of quelled a bit in the morning. I mean, we'd been through fixing so many things. We were getting pretty like hardened to being out there. You know, like it didn't.
Yeah.
Like again, it's like getting shelled by waves for 12 hours, 6 to 8 hours maybe. But got up in the morning and we're just like, we have to get on with this. So started to build. We had a spare rudder, but it tore the bracket off and everything. So we were like making and shimming like bits of wood, which have to be like kind of precise, which is, it's not a wicked hard job if you were at home sitting on stable land, but like we had like limited tools making these like exact pieces of wood with like a chart plotter, like to measure them, and got it all like to fit together. And then putting it in where like you're not in a stable environment, and the rudder is a massive piece of wood that now has to go into the sea and be held tight while the boat's moving in like a decent sized swell. So the minute you put it in, it just wants to go wherever the current is going. And we have to get all these bolts in. So Ryan is on the bottom. The hatch is like big enough for one guy to stand up in. So Ryan is out the hatch with his belly on the hatch. I'm on top of Ryan, and then Chris is holding my ankle so I don't fall in off the back. So we're putting in, like Ryan is so far down because there's a pin has to go in from the bottom, and we're trying to hold this thing and get the pin in. And then we manage, like it took, everything we have is like tied into strings in case we drop it. So like every little tool is like tied in, but we get to the last bolt. You can't tie the bolts in. So we had this bolt where like the bolt that goes from the piston into the rudder, and we have only one bolt that fits that. Like it's a specific bolt. There's no replacing this bolt, and there's no real workaround because it's like a stainless steel fitting. I have the bolt. Ryan is trying to hold it, and like he goes, "Dude, don't drop the bolt. Don't drop the bolt." And I was like, "I get it." And we were trying to do that, and we were sweating trying to get this bolt in, and like everything is going up and down. But we got it in and got it all tightened. And we sat back after that one. And I mean, I have to say, I was impressed with us for getting some of these things done out there. I mean, it was wild fixing that rudder and actually getting it working perfectly again. And then, funnily enough, like 2 days after that was when the power system kind of went down again, and there was no fixing that one.
So how long did you go with the new rudder? 2 days, was it?
Couple of days, yeah. The rudder is fine.
It was fine.
I mean, the rudder would have been fine. I mean, we would only been arriving around now if we could have kept going. And the thing is, like, our risk tolerance is pretty high. But being out there for September, you start to see the like the big weather coming in. So there was like Hurricane Larry passed, was just like, say, after we got out of the water, it was pretty close, like the week after that. And that crossed over some of the places we had been. Now, I don't think it would have hit us, but you don't know, like whatever the path is. But that was churning up like 40 to 50 foot swell near the Grand Banks at like 150 mile an hour winds at its peak. So, I mean, that would kill us, you know? So it's good that we weren't there for that.
Was there any like the fear of God put into you at all at any stage when you were there? When the waves hit you, did you ever think like one wave and you're gone? Was it any?
I don't know, you know, like I think maybe I just have a different, like I felt pretty sturdy where we were, you know. I don't think we would have wanted to go from like those 20 foot. I wouldn't like to be out there in waves that were twice as big as the ones we were in, and the waves, they were just massive, you know, because there's only so much pressure the boat can take. But I was pretty confident that we were okay then, you know.
Yeah.
Like the one time that I was kind of reminded, like, because you're just always getting on with things, and it's like you're not really sitting. There's no time to kind of sit and dwell. It's always just like get it fixed, get rowing, keep going. There's always kind of something to do. But one night we were out there, and it was another kind of stormy night, and we were doing the swap over. So you're getting up, like it's all wet clothes. You're putting on wet clothes to take them off again in 2 hours. And the guy who's on deck, he's been rowing for like 3 hours at nighttime, and I'm getting up at like 2 a.m. to go out to start rowing for 3 hours. And you get out, everything's very noisy in a storm out there. So the rain is like beating down. The guy on deck kind of just wants to get back inside, you know? So you're kind of mumbling over and back. The visibility is a little bit lower, but when I get out to change the oar, the wind is blowing everything around. So usually the oar is in an oar lock. So if you let it go, it just kind of flips to the side of the boat. And this lock, which is a pin and a fastener, holds it to like a massive amount of pressure. So what had happened was I went out. This is when we were in like the Arctic current, the Labrador. So it's after getting kind of cold at night, kind of off Newfoundland. It comes down the side of Newfoundland. So again, the boys had put like mitts, these kind of mitts for the first time on the oars. So I was trying to get my hand in, and the oar slipped out of the mitt, which is fine. And I expected just to put my hand up. The rain is like beat down. And I put my hand up, and the oar's not there, you know. So I'm like, and we only had 2 good sets of oars. The oars that we had to replace them weren't as good. So immediately I'm like, where's the oar? And I get down on my knees. I'm trying to hold like my cushion and stuff that's just going to blow away. And I'm on my knees. I get to the side of the boat in like a few seconds, and I look up, and the oar is already gone. Like you can see the fluorescent collar, the center of the oar, and it's already gone like 50 meters, you know, in a few seconds. And then 5 seconds later, it vanished into the sea, you know, like there's no. And for me, like I was just sitting there thinking, I'm glad that's not like one of the boys, you know.
Yeah.
Like losing the oar is, but that was a human error. It's like someone forgot to fasten that properly, and like it didn't break. It was someone forgot to do it. So we would take, like, someone took the oar out, forgot to fasten it, and I mean that could just as easily happen with like a safety knot, a tether thing, you know. So there was a couple of times where things broke, but if you went overboard in any kind of like lack of visibility, only if like you fell off overboard in like perfect conditions is someone kind of coming to get you, you know? Like you're gone 10 seconds, and then 2 hours later, like you'll die of hypothermia and probably float around because you have your life vest on.
Jesus, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, say if you were all on deck and 3 of you were blown off, like is there anyone watching you to keep an eye on you to say, we got to send out a rescue team here?
I mean, that would be unlikely because there's always someone asleep. And the funny thing is, right, after a few weeks, when the fatigue kind of starts to set in and that, with you're rowing 12 hours, the water maker broke, we can get into that. We're pumping water multiple hours a day. So at the start, like if something made a beep, like everyone was up, like what's going on? You could have set off a grenade on the deck about 4 weeks in, and whoever was asleep would just go, nothing to do with me. Do you know? Like if people just slept through like logs, through everything. Like you just conked out for that like nighttime sleep. People just didn't care. You could be in the cabin, you could sit on them. They were just like, I got to get some sleep. So if you fell in, I don't think the other two boys would even wake up. I mean, people were just like out cold. And you're talking like it's noisy all the time. People are in and out of the cabin. They're like on top of you, and people would just sleep through the whole thing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Tell me, physically, how were you feeling after a couple of weeks?
Grand. Do you know, it's so funny. Like a lot of people, you hear about like the disruptions or the problems being like between the people and their bodies, like they start to break down and that.
Yeah.
We didn't have any issues with either the morale on board or our bodies. There was didn't have any skin issues. Ryan had this great kind of salve that like they make near his house in California. All Good Goop. Shout out them, sponsor. But the stuff was just magic. We put it on like our hands multiple times a day. Like we still built up all the calluses, but your hands remained perfect. We had no salt sores, there's a little bit of the pressure sore kind of thing creeping in after like 60 days though. It's like people start falling apart after a couple of weeks out there. So we didn't have any of those problems. Now the boat broke literally daily. Like there wasn't a day where it went by where it's like something didn't fall off something, So that kept us. Maybe would have been better, like us breaking down a bit and the boat not falling apart all the time.
I think all the problems just seemed to embolden you more. The daily setbacks. It was just.
It was funny actually. I remember because it's so like ecstatically high and then big lows, and you get into it. And I mean, I like that. I kind of like getting the push on that kind of front. It definitely makes you feel alive. When you're like, yeah, it's getting kind of risque out there. But those things, we had a spell once for like a week where nothing really happened. Like there was no like great disasters or there was no real danger or that. And then I remember thinking during that week, I was like, this is like kind of just getting boring, But I just started laughing at myself. I was like, if you had asked me the week before when something broke or it was going to be over or whatever, that I would have given fucking my hand to stay there, and now I'm complete. Like it lasted like 2 seconds. I just started laughing at myself. I was like, oh great, yeah. Boring, yeah.
So tell me what ultimately failed you in the end? It was the power system, was it? And that was a new power system that she had put in at Cape Cod.
It was a new one, yeah. I mean, the problem with essentially, our issues were from, like, if I had all the money that was eventually spent on that project at the very start, we could have, like, the boat would have been in a lot better condition. But the issue is, you kind of have some money to do it here, then all these sponsors kind of showed up right near the end, especially the bigger cash ones. So we were kind of rushed to get jobs done. And you're putting blind faith, and you have to, into like a bunch of people who say they know what they're doing. And they're not just random people. I mean, boat people, different things. And like some of these mistakes were made before we left, not to do with that power system, but some other things where it was just like, so if it had all been put together, so we really were just kind of shoehorning that power system onto this boat, and it worked amazingly well. until we got to, so the weather just started to get a lot worse consistently. Like it was stronger towards the end. So like the waves were bigger all the time. And once you get to like a certain wave height, the swell height, they start to crash onto the boat all the time. So you like everything starts getting wet all the time. And you close again, if you're going to in a kind of bigger swell, you have to close everything in case you get like brought up and toppled down the wave or something. So then when it's all closed, it's wet inside as well because the condensation is like pools of water literally on the floor. So this thing started to get wet, and then if you leave the door open, it gets hit by a wave. So water soaked into it, and it got to the motherboard. Now I called everyone literally on the planet to try and get this thing fixed, and we eventually talked to the people who made it in Germany, and they told me that it doesn't. What was it? Oh no, it's maintenance free, and I was like, oh great, well it's broke. Unless it needs maintenance, and I'm like, some of the support people you call, like that make so-called like emergency industrial equipment, like you just call them and they're like, oh, plug it into a computer, and you're like, what are you talking about? Like, so yeah, we would call all manner of support people. I mean, the water maker broke. They sent us the wrong parts, so they looked like the right parts, and the water maker, pretty essential piece of kit. So the motor broke in the water maker, and it was drawn. There's some kind of resistance in there, and we didn't have the tool to actually open up. They'd sealed this motor. You weren't supposed to open it, so it was sealed to like just a stronger degree than we could actually do anything with the tools we had, the kind of basic tool set. So we take it off of that, and there's a hand pump kit. So you change from using the motor pushing the piston to a big like long levered handle. So I had ordered this kit from them. Again, it's like emergency, it's life-saving equipment. They sent it out. Now I looked at it when I got it, and it's pretty straightforward. Like you kind of have a couple of brackets, the handle comes in, and you can see how it works. So I was like, okay, great, packed it. Now, when we took it out in real life to use it, it turned out that all these pieces, they sent like two left ones instead of a left and a right. They had milled the things wrong. They were too big to fit into the positions. They put a bar in where the bar was supposed to slide through from a fixed position on the motor. They'd put a bar into the handle. So like, and machine pressed it in so it wouldn't come out. But it's impossible to put this thing together with this pin in. So we're just like, what is going on? You know, like we're drinking the ballast water, which is like the kind of skunky water that's used to keep the boat. It's fresh water, emergency fresh water, but it's used to keep the boat, the weight of the bottom of the boat down. So we're drinking that. We're kind of boiling some of it, drinking it away, waiting for the storm to pass to fix the water maker. And then when we get the kit out, and because we were looking at it, and you're just like, none of this fits together, you know? So we ended up having to use a jet boil, which we use to make the food. So if you put a jet boil on a new gas canister, it's essentially a blowtorch. So we Ryan blowtorched the end of the handle to heat up the metal enough. And then we were like hammering out these metal pins out of this handle. And then all the fixtures all had to be filed with a Leatherman to try and fit them in, to hammer them in, to use all these different bits on the boat to make this thing work. And then we had to mount it. It's a whole thing. But it worked eventually, which definitely was the best tasting water. It was, that was a magic moment. Fixing the things was the best, like the highest highs of the whole thing. Fixing the water maker, fixing the rudder, where like you just think everything is gone, and then you're using kind of your own creativity to get these things back online, you know? Like we kept comparing it to like, you know, people in like when they're the ingenuity of people in prison for making things, because you just have to use, there's a lot of things you can use and there's nothing else. That's what it felt like on the boat, where it's like, what do we have roughly this size? And we're like filing things down. So we got it there. The only problem was, though, we had to hand pump all the water after that. So it took like 4 hours, which would only make like 5 liters of water. And I read after that I was like, how much water are you supposed to be drinking a day? So you're supposed to drink like 3 liters before your food or anything. And we were using like 1.5 liters per man for food, drinking water. So some of the, like, you pee in a bottle inside the cabin if it was sketchy outside, like if it's absolutely whatever it is, right? If it was dangerous or it's the middle of the night or whatever. So we would do that. And then you start like, you clean the bottle in the ocean. And you're like looking at these small amounts of pee that are like definitely not the right color. So we were rowing like 12 hours a day on 1.5 liters of water for like a month. But I think we felt fine. I don't think that was actually it didn't seem to be like, again, the bodies were fine. We were like running on fumes with
you're
the water.
You're made of something else, the 3V.
Yeah, it just didn't. It's funny, like the actual physical exertion of it didn't. You just kind of get into it, It was way harder when you couldn't row. Like if the 3 of us had to stay in the cabin on power anchor or in the bigger storm kind of stuff, like the cabin didn't fit 3 people. Like I can conclusively confirm that. It fits 2 guys. And then so you have 3 guys kind of like they're with the gear and everything else. So it'd be like if you were like on a plane and you were forced to like sit like this or something, but then just try doing that for like 48 hours.
Jeez.
Where it's like everyone would move a little bit and then you come back and you try and get like the crick out of your neck. So I think some of those days were at the start, they were probably like a break from the rowing. Like the rowing at the start was harder till you kind of, get into it and your body starts to really adapt. But after a couple of weeks, I mean, I think everyone on the boat, rowing was their kind of savior, right? I mean, Chris is like, would take out his frustrations on, he wouldn't get upset during the day, even if things weren't, not at another person, but like we weren't making enough progress. Like we were in the banks off of Nova Scotia. So, I mean, essentially anything that could have went wrong on this trip, pretty much. Then not to like, obviously there could have been a lot serious things. In the minor things, like you're only supposed to come off the shore once because it's the hardest part because the tides are always dragging you back. So we did New York coming off the shore, Cape Cod coming off the shore. Then the wind blew us into Nova Scotia, the biggest tide. So then we did the whole of Nova Scotia and the whole of Grand Banks. So we did 4 tidal zones on this trip, which is like, I don't think anyone's ever done that because you just go home. Like we spent 2 weeks in the fog off Nova Scotia. And I mean, that was a wild experience. Like you can't see anything. It's just white all the time. Our kind of GPS navigation stuff seemed to be on the blink. It worked. You would row 6 hours and find out you'd gone the other way. And when you're like that, and again, we weren't really demoralized. It was tough some days where you're just like, why are we in the tides? Like, and I think that was, the wind kind of brought us there, but we perhaps could have had a better plan coming out at Cape Cod, that in hindsight.
Okay.
But Chris, let's say he would get frustrated at our lack of progress, but then he would just go out in the middle of the night and take it out on like the oars, Like I'd go outside, I'd get up at 2 a.m. and Chris is like outside and Chris is a unit and he's wearing like no shirt and he's just like, ah! And you're like, morning.
Tell me, how far out were you when you called it a day and when you were pulled onto the oil tanker, and talk me through what happened there.
We're about 2/3 of the way there, like just under, like we did like 2,000 miles. And all, like, funnily enough, when you look at it, you're kind of like, we would have been just past Greenland, let's say, if it comes down. But it's so far away from the coastline, really, like when you travel all the way across. So we had about 1,000 miles left to home. So there's still a good distance left. But the worst thing was, the hardest bit is the first bit. Do you know, like, by a measure of, like, we'd done all the hard stuff, passed all the banks, got off the Grand Banks, and now we were supposed to be, it literally was supposed to be like, we just bring her home, coasted in, you know, if the weather kind of come with us. So when the power thing went, and I mean, I knew it was done, you know, when I seen this thing, and I was like, oh, this isn't going to, and our solar, which was our original power problem, it's so cloudy there, and we had kind of older solar panels, which worked amazing in the sunshine, but there's no sun up there. There was no sunny days for weeks, you know? Like, you'd have a little bit of sun and it'd be like, oh, wow. Like, we had like a kind of a party one day because there was a bit of a blue sky, you know? And it's like, we've been in fog for like a week or something. You see the sun. So the solar just wasn't as good, as it wasn't creating enough power for us. So I text the Canadian Coast Guard. Canadian Coast Guard were amazing. They were like so on top of us. Like, they looked at the website, they like were writing us messages. They flew a plane out over us multiple times to see if we were okay. And the first day we didn't know we were just like, this plane is dive bombing us out in the middle of the sea. And then it was the same. I was doing an interview with RTE or something, and these are literally the only things that happened that week involving other people. And this plane dive bombs the boat, and I'm on the live radio thing at the time. I'm like, I need to talk to both these people. So the plane came back the next day, and we were still like doing maintenance on the boat. Just that happened to be at that time. And so then we talked to them, and they were like, this is the Canadian kind of surveillance thing or whatever. And then, like, for the next day, Ryan was like, hey, look, we better, if you hear a plane, start rowing hard immediately, because they don't think we're doing anything out here. So the next time we call them, we're like, are you pulling the oars? Yeah. But they were great. So I texted them on our sat kind of text, or our inReach. And I was like, hey, this is the situation. We're probably going to burn the power in like 48 hours. This other thing is beyond repair. And they were like, look, totally up to you. I mean, I was holding on that maybe we could just do it on the solar with like basically no power. But because we were being held up in New York and in Cape Cod, this was going into September. It just starts to get super sketchy. It's like, even before it, you get those kind of like bigger days, and that even at the end, we were feeling that all the time. It's like 8 foot, 10 foot waves. And if you go out there and stand in like minimum 10 foot waves, like it's definitely not for everyone, you know. You're like, oh, this is an interesting environment. So when that happened, they were like, you should call it before. That was their only recommendation. So the next day we found out we had like lost more power than by a certain amount of amps than we had gained in the kind of cloudy day. So I called the Coast Guard, and essentially we're asking for assistance. Now we're so far away that it's nothing to really do with the Coast Guard. They're just helping you facilitate something, you know. And they are doing amazing work. So they put out an email. It was how it worked out. And they asked ships that are somewhere, because we weren't in any immediate danger, it didn't have to be like the closest boat. I mean,
Okay.
essentially, we could have floated there pretty much for another month and a half, probably. You know, we're fully stocked. But he was like, yeah, just call me back in 4 hours with your coordinates and we'll keep doing that. He called back like an hour later and he said, there's a tanker, the Magnolia Express, going to pick you up today, like later on this evening. And we were like, amazing, you know. Now that day did feel like the longest day out there, you know, like your purpose has been kind of ripped from you. And suddenly, like, even though we live on this boat for 60 days, that day was a long day. We packed up all our gear. We didn't really know with the tanker what the situation would be getting on the tanker. Anything we had read would be you go up like a rope ladder. And then the sat phone call to the tanker captain was very kind of broken down. And it was like maybe there was going to be a boat. I don't know. We couldn't really make out what he was saying. So anyway, we like packed everything that worth any money that we like the life raft, some of that power unit that cost like $6,000 and broke, the etc. So we just kind of put that together. That was all heaped on the deck, and then we waited for the tanker for like from kind of 7 a.m. And the tanker did amazing because they sped up so they would get us during daylight. Doing it during the nighttime would be interesting. So when they got there, it was funny. They were like, your man called us and he was like, can you see us? And this is like massive. We were like, oh yeah, we can see you. And he was like, oh, I can't see you at all, you know? So they kept coming towards us. And he stopped like, a quarter of a mile away, not even. And then we rode to them. And even on like a 5-foot swell day, which is, I mean, there's definitely a swell, but it's not like the crazy kind of waves. But the side of the boat, the tanker, is creating this like big undulation up and down. And we go to we row towards the boat. So now the boat is like crashing into the side of the tanker. And this tanker was brand new. It wasn't even 6 months old. And I'm just scratching the side of it with this boat. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, I hope I don't have to they're going to bill me for painting this boat. The front of Barney is like the nose of Barney is just getting crushed. It's just disappearing, like banging with the force against this, not the hole, but you could see it just breaking down as it hits the front of the tanker. Like the force level is it's creating this big pull into itself, the tanker. Tanker's like 600-700 feet long. It's just a massive boat. Then they're throwing down ropes, but they throw down the tanker ropes, which are like this big. And there's nothing on our boat that's supposed to be dealing with like a 2.5-inch rope. So there's no cleats to tie it into. So we're trying to figure out that. It's kind of chaotic because the boat is going everywhere. And that was not an issue we had foreseen. Is like they're going to throw us ropes that we can't tie into. So now we're trying to get different rope to tie into that rope and again, everything is going everywhere all the time, which is, I think that's the thing you kind of don't think of when, like, if you try to fix something, like try and use a drill, but now I'm going to do this with your hand, like just makes everything more difficult. So we tried to tie this in, but they had this kind of basket thing that they lowered down, which was amazing. So
I saw a picture of that on Instagram.
Yeah. So we knew then we could kind of take the bags. So Ryan kind of runs along, monkeys himself up, grabs this basket, gets him in. Then we start throwing the bags in. Then we get Chris in. Then we get we're trying to take this life raft weighs like 75 pounds, and the boat is kind of going everywhere. So we get that off, and then I suppose one of the last kind of things. I'd left the AIS on, which is the tracker on the boat, and we would have had enough solar power. Like that solar power would have gradually, it would have powered it enough so you could kind of see where the boat is. And I'd left that on. And then one of the last thing I did, I just reached back in, I turned it off. I was like, I knew we had to abandon the boat, and I was like, I don't want to know. you know.
I was thinking, would it not bring up the boat? So you had to let the boat go, did you?
The thing is, yeah, I mean, that would be a huge.
Too big.
The boat, they could have put it on the boat, I think, but I mean, there was so much difficulty getting 3 guys onto that boat that tying these ropes, doing a full boat, like extraction out of the water, it just didn't seem. I don't think it would have been possible. So then, when you get off, I mean, you just cut the boat loose. I'd asked the Coast Guard and everything. I was like, well, what do I do here? What's the protocol with doing this? And they were just like, what are you talking about? Just get off the boat. Like, they're like, I was like, is there any like laws, or am I going to get sued down the line? You know, like always like multiple steps ahead. And they were like, there's no law where you are right now. Like,
you're safe.
We're in the middle of nowhere. You just leave that boat go. They're like, it's a big, big ocean. That thing's going to drift for years probably. So I'm just kind of left there holding you're trying to see what the last kind of pieces are. And I'm holding one of these ropes and I'm tired. And suddenly the boat drops out and the rope goes up. So I just go like multiple feet up into the air. And you're just like, okay. And I slip back down onto the boat. And then I suppose the thing, like, I was going to leave the tracking on. So we still had like minor solar power. And I would leave the AIS on, which was like, would track the boat. But kind of the last thing I did before that, I was just like, I turned it off, you know. I have the kind of personality where I check that every like 10 minutes, you know. I'm trying to get things in my life forever. Like, and then I just get. So turned that off and then got the last thing on and then kind of grabbed onto the basket and the boys pulled me in. So yeah, then we walked up, got onto the boat. It was funny because all of them had like a COVID protocol. So everyone on the boat was wearing masks and they took our temperature and all this. And it was kind of like a weird scene, right? Because it's all these guys with face masks on. And then we were led to go see the captain. And just as we were going to kind of go up the stairs, we kind of wobbly legs as well, you know, like you go to set off at a clip down this big boat and suddenly like your kind of legs wobble because they're not used to walking that much, you know, built it away over the couple of months out there. And then I just stopped for a kind of a minute, you know. I'm definitely full steam ahead kind of pragmatist most of the time, but I looked out then and I seen the Barney's kind of drifting away. And I just went, just give us a second there, and kind of stood there and took it in for him. Like felt like a long moment, but it was only a couple of seconds, you know. And I seen like a lot of time and effort went into getting that boat to that point, you know. And then you're thinking about, you know, it's disappointment that it couldn't have went the whole way, and what that would have meant. And then I mean, that's it. You just kind of gotta soak that in for a second and then get on with it. And find out that climbing like 5 flights of stairs is very hard when you haven't climbed a step in 5 months. We were like, I thought we'd be a lot fitter after but it turns out when your legs are kind of wilted, we were like, that was tougher than we expected. Got on the tanker. Everyone on the tanker was amazing. Told them our story. They were like enthralled by the whole story. And yeah, they like, it was a whole other adventure being on the tanker for 9 days, coming back to originally we were going to New York, but then we learned all about the petrochemical business as well, where we were selling the gas all the way like the last day, you know. So we ended up going to Boston in the end. And there was like a lot of confusion. It was funny, the Coast Guard came to talk to us. So the Coast Guard come to check out the boat anyway, because of like the coastal regulations and like, because it's a brand new boat, they had to see the fire drill and all this. But when the Coast Guard came, they sent like this, she was like this really attractive Coast Guard woman. And we were just like, who is this? You know, and I'm trying to explain, and like Chris and Ryan are just like, yeah, we really like, we did this, you know. And it's like hyping into this lady, you know, about like their badass adventure. It was yeah. then, like, I mean, the Coast Guard were great. Coast Guard, Lieutenant Commander of the Coast Guard sent a lovely letter to Captain Sandeep saying thank you for rescuing our guys out there. But then they left, and we were like, everyone was kind of confused as to when we were getting off this boat. So it ended up being, they were like, well, maybe immigration will be tonight or whatever. So we were like, okay, we'll go to bed. And then at like 1 a.m., the boat was after being taken into the port, but we didn't know that. It wasn't supposed to be the next morning. And you see that like these alarms go off, and you're like, you've only been asleep an hour, and you're like, okay. And then they're like, oh, we're doing immigration now. So we come down the stairs, and you get your passport, whatever. And we get there, and they're after hearing the story. And like everything when we got back to America was like, we were the boys, you know, like it was like, get out of the way, the boys. So like, all the fellas on the ship, the like American immigration guys, like, get out of our way, the boys are back. You know? So they were asking us about the whole trip as well then. And like we did the immigration, and we were like, oh, but we still didn't know what was going on. And we were like, when do you want us to get off? And they were like, you only get off right now, you know, like unless you want to go to Rhode Island. This is like 2 a.m. in the morning by the time. So we ended up kind of rushing upstairs to get our gear and everything kind of the last of it put together. And then we just went down, and even the captain was like, oh, you're getting off now. But it just was, we weren't, no one was expecting to have to deal with us along the way. Do you know what I mean? Like their whole system is so like Loctite. So we ended up just getting off this boat, and the bags were all heavy bags. You know, we were trying to salvage like the lifeboat and some of this power equipment. So they were all like 60, 70 pound bags, the heavier ones. And we got down and we got off the boat, and we're in like an oil refinery in Boston, somewhere on the outskirts of Boston. And then we just like sat on a curb at an oil refinery and that was like, it was the most fitting end. It was just a three of us with like, you know, these like expedition bags mounted around on the street, just total silence in this like dimly lit like oil refinery in Boston. Yeah. And then, but yeah, we ended up hanging out. We like, nothing is open in Boston 24 hours. Anyone from Boston listening, someone sort that out. It's desperate. We ended up getting a cab to like an IHOP and sitting there for like 6 hours or something outside of Boston, and then we got a spin back to New York. We were trying to take the train, but it was right after Hurricane Ida, and the whole train was like packed, and there was nowhere to put the bags or anything. So we ended up getting a spin back to New York, which was great.
All right, very good. So where exactly did they pick you up initially? The oil tanker? How far out were you? And where were they? Were they going? They were coming from Europe to America, was it?
Yeah, they were like 240 miles away from us when they took the call. And they got there in, I mean, they were flying, you know, they got there in like 10 hours. They were motoring. We were 600 and something miles from Newfoundland. So way out in the middle of nowhere, basically. Like you're far enough away. There's no Coast Guard. The whole thing is like you're international waters. And that's when I was talking to because I was worried about cutting the boat loose, you know. And the Coast Guard was like, "What's the law out here? Like, what's this picture look like a year down the road, you know?" And they were just like, "It doesn't matter, you know. There's no law. You're in just total no man's land there. It doesn't matter. Like, we just need you to get off the boat. You know, the boat could drift for years." And they're like, everything out there is not worried about a 24-foot boat. You know, it is. They won't even notice. Yeah. Like if they went over.
So how many days at sea would you have been if all was going to plan? How many days left would you have had before you would have hit Waterford?
Very hard to say, you know, like as we found out, right? Yeah. It was like the question was like, oh, when are you going to be in Ireland? And even like some people figured out that it wasn't as simple as that after like the first little while. But I mean, people are still stopping my mom in the supermarket at home going like, now, what time exactly is he going to be into Dungarvan? But that was the great. I'd say we would have been coming in the last week of September.
Okay.
Would have been so like last week. Really, we would have been out there another month to get it done. I figured, but I think that was one of the great lessons of the thing was that everyone is you're so wrapped up in convenience now, and everything is always made to draw people towards convenience, like all like seamless, all these things, and you just expect to be able to do what you want to do when you want to do it, right? And that just went out the window. This was like you can go where the kind of sea wants you to go. Like if you don't want to die, you don't want to go towards this hurricane, and again, you just kind of had let go of all that, where it just became a very different world, really, than what most people are used to nowadays in like the modern world.
I just said when you got on the boat that night, I suppose you took a proper hot shower the first time in probably 2 months and a good meal. How did you feel? How did you feel after that?
Yeah, do you know what? It was like the shower was fine. Like the shower was nice, but almost having because we all had our own cabins on the boat or on the tanker. Yeah. It was nice to just kind of, and the meal. So the captain brought us downstairs and like very hospitable. And the first thing he was like, kind of like they had a store where they kept all the, let's call it the treats or whatever, like a lot of like sweets, candy, chocolate. And he brought us to there and he was like, dude, take whatever you want, like you got, but we've been eating Snickers like all day, every day for like the past 2 months. And like we were all just looking at these big boxes of Snickers going, I can never eat another fucking Snickers. So we took one anyway because, we were like, we were like, thank you so much. Thank you. And we had our like Kit Kat and our Snickers or whatever. And they brought us in then to the officers' mess for dinner. And they gave us like chicken and potatoes. And I mean, we just looked like savages eating the chicken, we were like, eating the bones and everything. And you could just see the captain was just like, just give them more chicken. They seemed to like chicken, But the food was amazing on the tankers, like 3 square meals a day, all Indian food. And our whole lives were based around like 7:30 a.m., 12 p.m. for lunch, and then 6 p.m. for dinner on the boat. Yeah. So it was, shower, all that stuff was amazing, but it doesn't take away from you wish you were still on the boat. We wish we were still on Barney, I mean, it's like hot shower, great, whatever. It would have been great to finish it off as well,
Yeah, so you would have plenty of time to reflect on the boat. What were your initial thoughts when you just had that kind of moment on your own in the cabin as to how the trip went? And a couple of weeks later, how do you feel now compared to? Like
initially, you're glad to be. There's a certain release in safety, so to speak. Do you know what I mean? Like nothing happened to you on the tanker, so it's like suddenly you're in an environment where you don't have to worry about your own life and your guys' lives. So for me, it's like you just kind of get to let go a little bit, which is a tremendous relief after like 60 days of it being kind of like we have a lot of issues to deal with constantly. So that was good, and I'm always moving forward. Like immediately I'm thinking, what's the next thing? Like we gave it everything that we could. I mean, we solved more problems than I think I've ever seen on one of these ocean road things, to be honest. Like if you look at all the different expeditions before out there, I think we did every one of their problems, I think we're the only people to ever escape like 4 different tidal zones in one trip, Now, I don't know, should we have done that, but we did. And so they're like immensely proud of what we got done. And the funny thing, like a lot of people like messaging you, like they're gutted for you didn't get to Ireland. But like in reality, for me, like I could always get a plane to Ireland. Like I obviously want to go see my family, But the point of it was never really to go to Ireland. The point of it was to go and experience what it's like in 20-foot seas in a very small boat with like lightning crashing down around you, you know? Like that's what I was going out there for. You know, I wasn't trying to make the awkward way to get to Ireland. So I definitely got the experience that I went out there for. So for me, it wasn't, for me, the trip was a success personally, you know. Now, overall, as a project, it's like it'd be nice to get her to Ireland, but if you're going to do these kind of things, you better be able to deal with disappointments. You're not going to sit at home crying about it, you know. It's like if you want to do it again. If you want to do something else, let's do that and get on with it.
For the future, that's my next question. Are you going to do it again, or what's the plan?
I think we're definitely going to do something again. For the amount of time and effort and resources and everything that went into that trip, the only thing that was missing in it was landing that boat in Ireland, you know? So for me to put that amount of time, money, and energy into something, and you're looking at a diminishing return as well, right? You get it to Ireland the next time, it's not as good as doing it the first time. Now, the only thing would be maybe the boat shows up somewhere and it's like, we got to go get the boat. Like that, I find that exciting, you know, where it's like the boat is just trashed on a desert island somewhere and we go find the boat and then we go to the boat. That's interesting. But starting it all over from scratch again and getting there, I'm going to leave probably to someone else. There's a couple other Irish guys going next year and they're going to crush it. Project Empower 2022. Check them out.
Cool. So Ray, obviously there's a lot of cost put into it. What like, can you give us an estimate on like and how much it cost you? I know there was money being raised, and probably, I don't know, could you raise enough money to cover the cost? But we'll give us a kind of an insight into how much money you shoveled into it.
Yeah, way too much. I mean, so the thing about the money was, it's like it probably ended up being over 100 grand that whole trip, and again, it's like to do these self-supported expedition things, they're hugely expensive. You know, it's a big step up from being like, you know, you're going to have to do an Ironman or something or whatever it is, right? These like the organized races where other people are taking on the organization and the safety stuff and all the rest of it. So, I mean, yeah, it cost me tens of thousands of dollars this trip. Now we had the sponsors come in at the end. But it was funny, if I had all the money that I had that was spent cumulatively on it at the start, the trip probably would have been, I think we would have got to Ireland, because a lot of the money came in with the sponsorship stuff right at the very end. And then we were like rushing to other people get excited about it right at the end. And it's tough at the start to say, oh, I'm going to gamble this amount of money on this project and hopefully we get the sponsorship. And then it's like, is it an overreach? So there's a lot of those kind of things go into it, but you do have to look at it like, it's like a business. Like the first time you do something to this level, you have to do it yourself. You have to bootstrap it. You have to prove that you can do it. So even though we didn't get to Ireland, we proved beyond a doubt that we can do this style of expedition, right? And all we really needed was someone to come in and support it from the get-go. And that, you know, we would definitely got there. If the boat had been in better condition, specifically the systems on the boat herself did great, then we would have done that no problem. Do you know, like we didn't have one issue with rowing. We were knocking that out. We could have stayed out there for months more, you know, like morale was high. No man broke on that boat. You know, the boat broke down on a daily basis, which is obviously part of the project, in that if we had the resources from the get-go, I don't think, and if we had one guy kind of like overseeing that kind of boat build, where it ended up being like 3 or 4 guys and they were almost making mistakes just because it wasn't the same person, you know, like they were working in these, like, we're like, we need this done like in 2 days. We're leaving America in a week. You know, and things aren't being tested right. And that was always the case with every kind of system thing that went in. So with a kind of a longer time period, I think that would solve a lot of the issues, you know.
Yeah, you had a good couple. You had a big few sponsors. I saw there was some big donations at the end, and you had your main ones at the beginning. And of course, you were trying to raise funds for the Kevin Bell Repatriation Trust.
Yeah, it's tough. Again, it's like with the expedition thing to really raise money. Like we were so disconnected out there, even though like the Instagram and the social media and stuff was running, we couldn't see any of that. We were just like sending pictures and text over it, and that's it. You know, we don't really know what's going on. So like we have to hold this little satellite thing out the window for 15 minutes trying to send like a picture. Right. So there was no, like people are right on you'll only see the Instagram after you come back and people are talking as if you're doing it, you know? So doing anything even more than that, like trying to raise the money on the go without like the dedicated kind of team to do that.
Yeah.
Because they're like just asking all the favors for people just to like, can you post this, do this and that. So, I mean, we raised like 10 grand plus in the end for Kevin. And then Brilliant. My friend, Eddie, whose mom was sick along the way and very unfortunately passed away. So we were trying to do that as well. So I've been texting with Paddy, and I mean, hopefully we did some good, you know. You have to have the bandwidth to do it. Like we just didn't have time. There's like literally on the boat, it's, you know, you don't have the energy the energy is about getting from A to B and staying alive, you know. It's and that's kind of it has to be the focus, you know.
So what was the dynamic like between the three of you, Ray? Because I know you had not really met before the trip, so you're just getting to know each other. But in previous podcasts, you were saying that was probably the best thing to happen, that you didn't know each other going into it. So how did you manage? How did you get on the three of you over the couple of months?
It was, there wasn't, and it was funny. Like we had a great time, the three of us, and like coming into it, I don't know how to tell you the story, but Chris had suggested like that we do a kind of a group kind of counseling session with a guy he knows, and I was kind of skeptical at the start, but it turned out it was a great way of just kind of setting out what people wanted from the trip and stuff like that. And I used to like the guys when they were like, what is your focus for the trip? And like Chris and Ryan were like, oh, I'm just trying to have a good time every day, you know, like bring the good vibes or the good time every day. And I was just be like, what are you talking about?
They're two bros.
You know, and then like Sky, the guy was like, and for me it was like I'm totally focused on A, getting everyone safely from A to B, and B, getting to B, right? And it's like in my head, having a good time is like maybe, I don't know, it's not important, like in my head, you know. So then the boys like redid their one, and they were like, for us to have a good time and to make sure Ray has a good time as well, you know. And like they did it, you know. We had a great time out there, and it very much fit into like the dynamic kind of us all being in slightly different places in our lives, you know, from like 40 years old to 26 to 21. And that dynamic kind of just sorted itself out, you know, when we were out there, you know. Yeah. So it was, it went great, yeah, on that front for sure. Yeah.
So you're back to the day job now, back to the restaurant business with Worthwild inside in Manhattan. Tell us what it's like to be back doing a normal day's work.
No, like I got off an oil tanker on Friday, and I was back at work Saturday morning, and so yeah, I'm trying to relieve. I think people were more stressed about, you know, so I'm back, and then yeah, it's grand. It's funny, you slot right back into that, and it only seems strange that you're like 2 weeks ago I was in like the aftermath of a hurricane in a small boat going up and down like 15-foot waves, and now I'm walking down like Fifth Avenue or whatever, you know. Yeah. So I mean, I thought that was fine. It again, just kind of getting on with it, you know. Got home, have a bunch of kind of big projects in my head, business wise. We have we're talking about stuff on the adventure side as well. So I've got a ton of ideas, and I've got a lot of energy, Michael.
Yeah, I could see that, man.
Bigger and better.
Looking for the next thrill.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, always.
What was your family's reaction? You're married, aren't you? Your wife's reaction when you got back was just more than safety, or?
Yeah, she was. I mean, she had said, I think she thought at the start it was a little bit tougher than she was expecting, and then you kind of get like everything, you get used to it. But yeah, she was obviously delighted I was back. I mean, I didn't even see her. Like, she works like a lot of hours. She works at a hospital, so like I didn't even really see her for the first week, even 2 weeks I was back. Like, just kind of a few kind of captured moments. And then, yeah, I mean, everyone's delighted you're back, and they slot back in pretty easy. But I don't think I'm going anywhere for 2 months or 4 months or whatever, like anytime in the next, shorter next little while.
She want a good holiday now, Ray. You'll have to give her a good holiday.
And already, that deal has been made. Before. I was making all the deals before I left. Just everyone's gone on holidays now. My business partner, the world has left me. I'm the one in New York.
Yeah. What have you, just because we touched on this in previous podcasts, with the bar and the restaurant industry, so you're back into it now. Are you seeing what kind of changes are you seeing? I see that business is kind of down in the last couple of weeks and months. So how's the business been going?
Yeah, I mean, business is great for us. I mean, in my mind, it's like, I'm always looking at that like it's time to expand, like we're moving on to the next thing as soon as we can, and we have all that kind of in the motion. It'll be very interesting to see how the winter goes. I mean, we have a big outdoor setup now because of COVID, where it's kind of an unknown, right? Are people going to sit outside if those things are kind of enclosed? We obviously have like everyone being vaccinated to come inside, I think, has freed up a lot of the event side of the business. So now people feel a lot more comfortable with booking, 40 people events for a private room at anywhere, right? So businesses feel like they don't have the liability level, I think. So that's a huge driver of revenue in the last quarter of the year. Obviously, Christmas parties, all the rest of it. So, I mean, again, there's a lot of still money floating around out there where like debt, where it's like the landlord stuff, that's like a lot of that has to be yet fully decided with who owes, because we had gotten to the end of, they had the restaurant revitalization fund, which the government just made a total hames out of. That was just a disaster. There wasn't enough money in it. They designated that only certain people were going to get it. Then there was a bunch of court cases about the discrimination in that, and then they changed their minds, and then just absolute bureaucratic nonsense. But restaurants fell off the top of the woe betide me list, and unless you can get the money when you're at the top of that list in the public eye, right? If the public doesn't think you need it, the politicians don't care. Yeah. So restaurants are not on the top of that list anymore. So getting that fund replenished is going to be, it's probably not going to happen. So the thing is, a lot of the landlords and everything were waiting around to see. Everyone just wants to see that where the last of the money lies, and we're getting to that point pretty soon. There's not going to be any more big COVID relief things, or unless a lot of things collapse because of it. So it's going to be an interesting year in the restaurant and the bar business. I think there's a lot of the last kind of dominoes have to fall yet, but we'll see. I feel good, but if you can stay in the game, you should be fine, I think.
And the restaurant is Worthwild, isn't it? What's the address there, Ray, in case people want to go in and see a celebrity?
9th Avenue, between 19. Yeah. Stories,
Picture taken. And do you is it your extra space you have? Is it out in the road, or do you have somewhere indoor that's out the back? What's the extra outdoor dining area that you?
We have a back space as well.
All right, okay.
Have to commit to like being the kind of villain in the neighborhood sometimes, like even to one person, you know, who's going to call 311, like just, and not even, I'm not talking like 4 a.m, people outside at like 8 o'clock. So we built out the front, so on the street on 9th Avenue, and the neighboring landlords were kind enough to let us kind of expand it down the street. I would have just kept going. I mean, I'm trying to take over the meatpacking district. This wooden structure keeps growing all the way down the avenue. Just going to, like, bridges are going to go over the avenues. We're just going to keep
Yeah, I've noticed that for a couple of restaurants I see around the place. You know, they would have had a small inside space. I know they've got big outdoor spaces, which is great. So they probably nearly have more seats now in total, which is great. And everyone's sitting outside. And I think people get it. It's great sitting outside in the summer rather than being indoor. And
it's going to be an interesting mess, that whole thing, because obviously, like, some of the building stuff needs to, like, some of them look amazing and then some of them look awful. And the awful want to be the problem. Do you know that people already are complaining about them, but it's going to be very hard for them to standardize properly when they're trying to make them permanent next year. But like, even like the running of the power for them, where like you just have random power wires running around, like for them to start to figure that out and then obviously the city will need to make proper money off them. So we'll see. I don't know. That's all still in the works. But I mean, I'm a hard yes on keeping Worthwild 70 seats out there.
Are you seeing, is inflation having a big effect on the bar restaurant industry?
I mean, the costs involved in running a restaurant are just way higher now. Food costs, supply chain, everything is broke because of COVID. And a lot of the time, people can't, like wild things, like the liquor companies are like, oh, this liquor brand can't get bottles, you know, so we can't do that. Obviously, the labor market, it's impossible to hire like a line cook. There's a bunch of like kind of back end things that are making it very hard, but there's only so much. Like, I would always look at like the different metrics in like service. Let's say you're looking at service, the food, different things. So in New York, you have to be like, say, out of 5, I think a 5 on food, 5 on service. And then you have value, which you'll see in a lot of reviews, and we can track kind of how much value people think they're getting. And in New York, 4 is kind of the maximum for us anyway, that you can kind of shoot for. And even then, we would have to raise prices, but there's just a ceiling on what you can raise them to, you know, before people are just like, it's way too expensive. Yes. But you're just like, everything costs just way more than it did a year ago, you know? So, I mean, the margins definitely aren't as good, but what are you going to do? You just got to stay in it, and hopefully it comes good. And I think a lot of all this stuff will flatten out in the next kind of 6 months to a year, you know? It's not, nothing's forever.
We'll finish on a high note, Ray. You strike me, nothing phases you. Your positive mindset just shines through. What lessons did you get from the whole trip, and has it made you what would you say to people who are trying to go out and achieve something that seems to be unreachable? Have you any kind of thoughts or reflections on that?
Yeah, I think the lesson that, and what, like, for going on these kind of trips, you kind of learn like how kind of tough you really can be, or what you're capable of, you know, where sometimes, like, even over the last kind of years, I have to get home earlier, sleep more, like kind of that kind of stuff, where it and now I've just come back and I think I'm like bulletproof, you know. I'm like, I'll stay, you know, I'll do it. And I just think everyone's comfort level, it teaches you what you're really capable of. And people are complaining to me about stuff, and you're just like, what are you talking about? You know, and nothing phases me, you know, where it's like, that's fine. I mean, it's like, and you only have to think back to like how you felt in some crazy situation at sea. So that's definitely And I knew that going into it. That's why I do all this stuff, because it does make you kind of unfazable and just be like, kind of get on with it. But I mean, I suppose it's a lot of the stuff is cliche about like going to achieve this or to like just do it, you know? And it's like, it's never going to be easy, right? You're going to have to try and keep doing it, especially if you want to be the vision guy and like, you have to just never give up. I mean, people are laughing at me about that boat trip, or like, they're like, oh, that's never going to happen. Because again, everyone just thinks of things in this convenient modern lifestyle where you dream like these little dreams and then it's like very easy to do them. And it's like, if you really want to kind of start jumping levels as you go up, it's not going to be easy. It's going to take a few years to get it together. You have to be able to convince other people to buy into this thing. And then you just got to grind away at it, you know, and you will get there. You know, I really do believe that everything in my life that it has come that way, you know, all the successes have been from just pushing, way beyond where other people think other people would have stopped, you know? So that's my only advice to people. But again, it's personality driven. I'm just very like that. And if you can do it that way, yeah, go for it. Just get on with it is my kind of like, stop yapping about it. Like, just do it. Yeah. I hear a lot of people talk a lot and no one really goes, that was evidently true from like, there's about 10 people dropped out of this trip along the way and they did a lot of yapping about it. All they had to fucking do was show up and row, you know? And so that's my advice is just, if you have a big dream, get on with it, get it done.
Cool. Can people still donate or can people still?
Yeah. If you want to donate, just go to the Kevin Bell website and you can always donate to them. I mean, they're set up as, you know, they're a big charity at this stage where you can get money to them. Great cause. Hopefully we'll work together in the future again. And yeah, definitely support them. I mean, they're doing amazing work.
Okay. Ray, thanks very much. Thanks for coming on the podcast. It was a fascinating journey. I was enthralled by it. It was inspiring. Your credit, yourself and Ryan and Chris, fair play to you. And hopefully you'll do something again in the future.
We'll be back for the next one. Round 5. Thanks, Michael.
Ray, thanks a million, mate. I appreciate it. I will pop into the restaurant some weekend.
Why, Santi, my dear Annie.
And that's all for this week. Let us know what you think by leaving us a comment on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at The Long Haul Podcast, or visit our website, thelonghaulpodcast.com. Please like, rate and subscribe to the podcast. This will ensure that we can get even more episodes to you more often. You can check out all of our previous podcasts on thelonghaulpodcast.com, where we also have post-match interviews and reports on all of this year's New York GA finals. We also have plenty of boxing news ahead of Jason Quigley's world title fight next week, and of course a great story on the near 150 Irish runners who completed the New York City Marathon last Sunday. You can also read about other Irish American sports stories and other news items on this site. Slán go fóill, and thanks for listening.
Oh, you New York girls, can you dance the polka? And when we got inside the house, the drinks were passed around. The liquor was so awful strong, my head went round.